So we all understand what involuntary breath is. When we're sleeping, our body is paralyzed while our mechanisms in our brain stem instruct our heart and lungs and all the musculature connected with it to continue for oxygen intake. It's not really that much oxygen, it's minimal, but it's continuous and it's steady. And so for whatever reason, and there are reasons that this has happened, I will explain those, that we have come to depend on involuntary breathing at the conscious level as well. And that just isn't enough. A lot of scientists and researchers and medical doctors are looking at hypoxic mechanisms. Hypo is under, oxic is oxygenated, so low oxygen levels, hypoxia, that contribute to a cascade of conditions and situations that lead to breakdown, particularly of central nervous system, which is the brain and the brain stem. There are parts of the body and brain that, well, the brain is very oxygen greedy, but so are the heart and lungs. The other organs and surrounding musculature, including motor mechanisms, are less oxygen dependent. And that's interesting. They're kind of twitch. You can just keep playing the piano and you don't have to take a whole lot of breath to do it. You can start walking from here to California, and after a while you just keep walking. There are mechanisms that make that happen without a lot of oxygen. However, the brain is about 3% of the body mass, and yet it demands at least 30% of the oxygen supply, 35%, maybe 45 or 50% as we learn together how to stay tanked up and supply it with oxygen. Oxygen is the nuclear fuel of the body and brain, and it needs oxygen at the conscious level to achieve all the things that need to be addressed at the conscious level, especially in this industrialized day and age where we have so many things to do. So I have intentionally not tanked up before this video, so I'd like to show you and demonstrate what that's about. Yeah, breath, very important. We can live 7 weeks without food, 7 days or so without water, and only 7 minutes or so without oxygen. So do we really get enough? And from my studies and research, we do not get anywhere near enough. So there's a whole pivotal concept of staying oxygenated that I'd like to teach you, and I'm kind of teaching you from ground zero here because I haven't really tanked up this morning as I usually do. The lungs have evolved to take in 8 times more breath than we generally do at the conscious level. Where is that breath? How do we get that breath? Why do we have all that capacity if we don't need it? We do need it, is what I'm trying to put forth in my work. So let's look at that. When I tell a child to breathe, they usually lift up their shoulders. That's a fear-based anxiety breath, and that's a very important breath to have in a survival situation where you see something scary and you need that breath. It tells your brain that there's a situation that needs dealing with immediately and very efficiently. Adults, when I talk about it, low breath, they tend to straighten up and pull their shoulders up. So that is the emergency way to get breath, and there are toxic ramifications of that type of breath and how it plays out. So I'd like to talk to you about healthy breath, and one of the problems we're dealing with in the last 100 years or so, we're progressively surrounded by plastic, artificial sounds. I don't smell anything right now in my environment. That's basically what we're surrounded with. There are no breezes, there are no ocean things to process. We're not foraging for food anymore, so we're not using our olfactory system. However, olfactory is the main element of breath intake at the conscious level in the evolutionary sense. It's very passive, and it's a fairly deep breath. There are other stages of breath, but that's kind of the stage one. I want to talk to you about that a little more. The surface area of the brain for men, about the size of a doubles tennis court. That's a lot of surface area where oxygen is exchanged. Our lungs expand, they progressively go into smaller and smaller pockets of capillaries and little nodules that process air, oxygen exchange, carbon dioxide extinguisher, and or expenditure. And so put them all together. For men, it's a doubles tennis court. For women, it's a singles tennis court. That's a lot of surface area in our lungs. Are we using that? No, we are not. So this lesson is simple in its concept, that there is hypoxia, there's normoxia, and I would like to teach you ultroxia, so that you are tanked up, the brain is fueled. We're not only doing executive micromanaging of our life, and the value of that I will also contend and discuss with you later, but it also enables all the paleo, the older cortex, all the procedural memory, how to ride a bike, how to juggle, how to set a table, things that we don't even think about, drive a car. That is a procedural, implicit type memory that we can train and activate and put into any other new task acquisitions, neuroscience as it were, because it also helps in cognitive and emotional arenas, executive arenas, mathematical. That system has a lot of connections to different parts of the brain that we want to have in our conscious experience. So the lungs have a huge surface area, have a huge capacity for breath intake. They also, oxygen itself takes 2 to 3 seconds to transfer from the lungs to the hemoglobin that transports the oxygen to the brain. We'll talk more about that too. There's some other interesting details, uncomplicated details, basically. It's an all or nothing transport system. It either loads 4 units of oxygen onto the hemoglobin or it doesn't, generally. It unloads a lot of oxygen or holds on to 1 or 2 molecules. So we can really enable fueling of our brain and stay ahead of that, which is one way to stay ahead of the conscious experience. I hope this makes sense. I will explain it again in different ways as we go along. But just one thing the takeaway message today is all that really matters is what you do with your next breath. Let's talk a little more about that 2 to 3 second period of transferring oxygen to the blood system, which delivers to the brain, heart, and lungs, those aerobic muscle systems, aerobic systems that need so much oxygen. 2-3 seconds. So 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. It's kind of a long time, isn't it? Right? So passive breathing, involuntary breathing with collapsed ribs is what we generally do. We succumb to the gravity of this planet and have collapsed ribs. It's pretty shallow and pretty quick. So what's missing here? What's happened here? We're surrounded by plastic. Back to the olfactory system, we're foraging for food and wondering what's in our environment and sensing what's around us and using our hearing, for one thing, little crackles in the woods or whatever. The bigger processes, the wind, the movement of the planet, the environmental resonance is picked up through skin, hair cells, hair follicles, etc. Process that input. And that's how the brain experiences life, through sensation. But olfactory, smelling, is a very interesting thing. I usually have a little bit of cream or something, or a scented oil that I give to my attendees at lectures and give them a little bit on their hand, and they can, very passive, fairly deep breath, and you process it. You're thinking, what is that smell? And so olfactory pulls it in and it holds it while it's processing that smell. That is one powerful way to enable that oxygen transfer. Let's try that again. What is that? I did I washed my hands with some scented liquid. So I have something to smell here. If I didn't have anything to smell, it'd be hard to fake that, you know what I'm saying? So we have a very strong olfactory sense. Most animals have a very strong olfactory sense. It's a very ancient sensory modality, very important, once again. And I'd say I get a 3/4 cup of breath. That's how I kind of measure it. So say we have 3-4 cups of breath capacity. It's just a random example. And that an olfactory breath will give you 3/4 of that. We'll talk about the whole makeup of the system later. Olfactory. And then we have something called dermatomes, back breath. So I've got 3/4 a cup. That's about 1.25 cups. It's a lot more breath. We used to be on all our fours, and so that the muscles that surround the lungs will pull the breath into the system. And then we stood upright. Again, more muscles. I'd say at least 3/4 cup breath. And then I do a couple of extra pops. I do a horizontal upper torso, upper back, and then a final pop. That's about all the breath I can get into my lungs. And so you're looking at 2 3/4, 1.5 cups, and then 1.25 cups with the dermatomal, and then the little extra pops. So you're looking at 1.5, 2.5, almost 3 cups of full capacity lungs. That is, and those are the basic stages, 3 to 5 stages that I describe as oxygenation. And then you blow some of that out and just stay. Buoyancy is a big part of this as well. Here's a quick way to get this. So your as we usually are, we succumb to gravity, everything's sunken. We take a deep breath, put our arms over our head. All right, it's a pretty good breath. Put your arms down, don't let out your breath. And get very comfortable there and blow out about half of it. So that's one kind of a quick way to stay buoyant and open the muscles and rib cage so that a fuller breath capacity can occur at the conscious level. And I think that's it for today. We'll get into more details tomorrow. That's a good beginning, I hope, and just be a little bit aware of your breathing before you get out of bed in the morning. 5 or 6 deep held breaths, 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count expel. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, oxygen exchange, and pause. 2, 3, 4. And when you, in that slow exhale, that is where optimal function occurs. Tells the brain understands that oxygen is coming. Oxygen is coming, and hopefully has arrived and continues to arrive. And so function is just piece of cake. And life becomes very easy. Task acquisition, performance. And there are details of that we'll talk about in the future. But thanks for listening today. I hope you learned something. Tank up.